My half-sister I barely knew, transferred to my college and demanded I ditch my BFF roommate for her. When I refused, she started making my life hell, making wildly inappropriate jokes about my heritage. Hey everyone, I'm kind of new to posting here, but I'm really struggling with something and could use some outside perspective. I'm Molly, 18F, a sophomore at Midwest College. This semester, my half-sister Mandy, also 18F, transferred here, and it's turned into a complete nightmare. So the backstory is a bit weird. My dad had me and Mandy with two different women around the same time. Yeah, I know, it's complicated. Growing up, I barely knew Mandy existed, let alone knew her. Our paths crossed maybe 3 or 4 times total, usually during incredibly awkward, forced visits to our dad's place during summer breaks, or the occasional holiday weekend when scheduling planets aligned just wrong. I remember one specific 4th of July picnic when we were maybe 7 or 8. We sat on opposite ends of a picnic blanket, didn't say a word to each other, and mostly just interacted with our respective moms who were trying way too hard to be civil. Another time, maybe when we were 10, we were both at dad's for a weekend. He tried to get us to play a board game, but it devolved into stony silence after about 5 minutes. He mostly just seemed relieved when our moms picked us up. The last time I actually laid eyes on her before this whole college situation was probably in 7th grade. We were at dad's again, briefly. I remember thinking her clothes were kind of weird and she spent the whole time texting on a flip phone. We exchanged maybe 10 words total. She was just not really a factor in my life. A name associated with my dad's messy past, but not someone I considered family in any real sense. Fast forward to last fall, maybe October. I was deep into midterms, juggling classes, my part-time library job, and hanging out with my friends. My life here was good. I'd found my footing freshman year, made some really close friends like my roommate Sarah, got involved in the photography club, and generally felt like I was building my own independent life. Then out of the blue, I get a Facebook friend request and a message. It's Mandy. I honestly almost didn't recognize her profile picture. The message was surprisingly cheerful, saying she'd found me. How crazy is that? And oh, by the way, she got accepted as a transfer student to Midwest College and would be starting in the spring semester. My initial reaction was mixed. Surprise, mostly. A weird flicker of curiosity. Maybe a tiny bit of dread I didn't want to acknowledge. I mean, we share a father. Maybe this was a chance to, I don't know, connect? See if there was anything there? I definitely didn't feel any deep sisterly bond, but I figured, okay, she's coming here anyway. Might as well be civil. Maybe we could grab coffee sometimes, be friendly acquaintances. I messaged her back, something polite like, wow, small world, congrats on transferring. Let me know when you get to campus. Maybe we can hang out sometime. That's when things immediately got weird. Her reply came back almost instantly. It wasn't just excitement about transferring. It was this intense, immediate assumption of closeness. She started talking about how great it would be, how we could finally really be sisters, how we could hang out all the time. And then the kicker, OMG, we should totally be roommates. It would be perfect. I blinked at my screen. Roommates? I already had a roommate, Sarah, who is one of my best friends. We'd signed our housing contract for the year back in the spring. I explained this to Mandy gently. Hey, that sounds fun, but I'm actually already living with my friend Sarah in the dorms. We signed up together last year. But hey, they have a specific wing in Pearson Hall just for transfer students. It's supposed to be really good for meeting people in the same boat. You should definitely check that out. She completely ignored the suggestion about the transfer wing. Her replies became insistent. Oh, come on, Molly. Just tell Sarah your plans changed. It's not a big deal. Family first, right? Imagine how much fun we'd have living together. We could decorate the room, stay up late talking. It would be like we grew up together. I tried explaining again that it wasn't that simple, that Sarah was my friend and I wouldn't just ditch her, and that housing contracts were binding. Mandy wouldn't let it go. She kept pushing, sending multiple messages a day, painting this picture of a perfect sisterly roommate experience, making me feel guilty for not immediately agreeing. It felt like she was trying to bulldoze her way into my life. It got so uncomfortable and annoying that I eventually just stopped responding to the messages about housing. I figured she'd get the hint and sign up for her own room. I tried to steer the conversation to other things, like what classes she was taking, but she'd always circle back to the roommate thing. It left a really bad taste in my mouth before she even arrived. So, winter break happened. I stayed on campus for most of it because I was taking an intensive 3-week marine biology course. Random, I know, but it fulfilled a science credit and looked interesting. It meant the campus was pretty dead, mostly just athletes training, international students, and a few people like me taking winter session classes. Mandy, it turned out, was arriving almost 2 weeks before the official spring semester start date for transfer student orientation. She messaged me saying she was coming early and wanted to hang out as soon as she got there. Again, I tried to be reasonable. Okay, cool. Orientation week can be pretty busy, and I'll still have my class finishing up, but maybe we can grab coffee or something when we both have a free moment. I envisioned maybe 1 or 2 casual meetups during that orientation period. Nope. The day she arrived, my phone started blowing up. She wanted to meet immediately. I was literally in my marine bio lab, dissecting a squid. Glamorous. I know. I texted back, sorry, in lab right now, can't talk. 5 minutes later, another text. Lab finished yet? Where can I meet you? I explained I had class until 4 p.m. Then she suggested meeting right after, but that was when her first orientation welcome session was scheduled. I told her she should definitely go to that, meet other transfer students, get important info. Her response? Orientation stuff is probably boring anyway. I'd rather hang out with my sister. This pattern continued all week. She'd text me during my class times, wanting to meet up. She'd text me during her scheduled orientation events, complaining they were lame and asking what I was doing. She seemed to have zero interest in actually participating in the orientation designed to help her acclimate and meet peers. It was like her entire focus was latching onto me. When I'd gently refuse, saying saying I was busy with class or homework, or that she should really attend her orientation sessions, she'd get genuinely upset. Not just disappointed, but huffy. Texts like, fine, or guess you're too busy for me, or why won't you just tell me exactly what you're doing that's so important? I found myself constantly justifying my schedule to someone I barely knew. It was exhausting. I kept telling her we'd have the whole semester, that we could hang out when things calmed down, but she just couldn't seem to accept that I had existing commitments and wasn't available 24/7 at her beck and call. I started dreading the notification sound from my phone. I remember sitting in the library trying to study for my marine bio final and getting 3 texts in a row from her asking if I could leave the library to come meet her at the student union because she was bored. I finally texted back, a bit more firmly, Mandy, I need to study for my final, and you have an orientation event about campus resources right now. We can try to connect later in the week when we're both actually free. She replied with a thumbs down emoji. That was it. The spring semester officially started last week, and it's only gotten worse. The clinginess is off the charts. She seems to think that because we share DNA, we should be instant best friends and spend all our free time together. If I mention I'm going to grab lunch with Sarah or heading to a photography club meeting, she either invites herself along or gets visibly pouty and demands to know why she can't come or why I didn't invite her first. She doesn't seem to grasp the concept of having separate friends or activities. She needs constant validation and explanation. If I say I can't hang out, I'm busy isn't enough. She needs to know exactly what I'm doing, who I'm with, and why it's more important than spending time with her. It feels like I'm being interrogated. I've started being vague, just saying stuff to do, but that seems to make her suspicious. Then came the half-sister incident. We were in the campus coffee shop, Common Grounds, grabbing coffee between classes. I ran into Liam, a guy from my psych class, and his friend. Liam knew I had a sister, but had never met her, because again, I barely knew her myself. So, I introduced her. Hey Liam, this is Mandy, my half-sister. Mandy, this is Liam. I said half-sister completely factually. It wasn't meant as an insult at all. Honestly, calling her my sister felt weirder, because it implies a closeness and shared history we just don't have. Given that many of my friends didn't even know of her existence until a few weeks ago, saying half-sister felt like the most accurate and least confusing way to explain the connection without launching into the whole complicated family history. Mandy lost her mind. Right there in the middle of Common Grounds during the busy 11 a.m. rush. Her face crumpled and she practically yelled, half-sister? Why would you say that? It sounds like you're calling me half a person. She was loud enough that people at nearby tables turned to look. I was mortified. Liam and his friend looked incredibly uncomfortable. I tried to quietly explain, Mandy, no, that's not what it means. It's just the term for. But she cut me off, tears welling up. It's degrading. Why can't you just call me your sister? Are you ashamed of me? She then turned dramatically and stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving me standing there beet red with Liam awkwardly saying, okay, well, see you in class, Molly. It was beyond embarrassing. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Later, she texted me a long rambling message about how hurt she was, how I was intentionally trying to distance myself from her, how family should stick together, and how insensitive I was. I didn't even know how to respond to that level of dramatic misinterpretation. Honestly, maybe I could handle the clinginess and the drama if she were actually nice or fun to be around, but she's not. She has this weirdly judgmental, almost snobby attitude sometimes. She makes these pronouncements about things with absolute certainty, often looking down on others. For example, the other night, Sarah, my friend Emily, and I were hanging out in our dorm room watching a movie. Mandy texted asking what I was doing, and I made the mistake of telling her we were just chilling. 5 minutes later, she knocked on the door. I felt obligated to let her in. Emily was talking about her boyfriend, Mark. They've been together since junior year of high school, and they're doing the long distance thing now that she's here and he's at a college back home. They seem really happy, working hard to make it work. Mandy, who had met Emily maybe twice at this point, proceeds to launch into this unsolicited 10-minute lecture. She told Emily, very matter-of-factly, that high school relationships never last, that long distance is doomed, that she was probably wasting her time, and that they'd inevitably break up within the year. So Emily should really start preparing herself for it and maybe explore her options here at college. She said it all with this air of superior wisdom. The room went completely silent. Emily looked like she'd been slapped. Sarah and I exchanged horrified glances. Who says that to someone, especially someone you barely know? It was incredibly rude and presumptuous. I tried to salvage the situation, jumping in with something like, well, every relationship is different. Em knows what she's doing, but the damage was done. The vibe was totally killed. Emily made an excuse to leave shortly after, clearly upset. After she left, I told Mandy, hey, that was really out of line. You can't just say things like that to people about their relationships. Mandy just shrugged and said, what? I was just being honest. It's better she hears the truth now. She genuinely didn't seem to understand why it was inappropriate. It makes things so awkward because she goes around campus telling people, oh, Molly's my sister. People hear sister and naturally assume we grew up together, that we're close, that we have this shared history. Then they see her behavior or hear about things like the coffee shop incident or the lecture she gave Emily, and it reflects badly on me. People look at me strangely, probably wondering why my sister is acting like this or why I haven't mentioned her before. It's hard to explain the nuance. Yes, technically we share a father, but no, we are not close. I barely know her. Please don't judge me by her actions. Without sounding like a jerk myself, I do feel a sliver of sympathy for her. I get that she probably transferred here hoping for an instant family connection, maybe feeling lonely or insecure. Maybe she envisions this perfect sisterly bond like you see in movies, but she's going about it in the worst possible way. She's pushy, she's demanding, she ignores boundaries, she's socially clueless and sometimes outright rude, and she refuses to accept that relationships, even between half-siblings who didn't grow up together, need time and effort to build. You can't just force intimacy. She seems to think that because we're technically related, she's entitled to my time, my friendship, my social circle, and this this immediate, deep connection, regardless of my own feelings or her behavior. She completely ignores the fact that I didn't choose this situation. I had acquaintances from high school who came here too, but I didn't latch onto them expecting them to be my entire social life from day one. I understood I had to put in the effort to make friends and build my own life. She seems unwilling or unable to do that, expecting me to just hand over the life I've already built. I don't go out of my way to find her anymore. If I see her across the quad, I might give a quick wave and keep walking. But she actively seeks me out. She's not in any of my classes, thank God, but she has on more than one occasion just happened to show up in the dining hall right when I'm eating with Sarah, or lingered outside my English class waiting for me to come out. It feels like being stalked, almost. It's not even that I want nothing to do with her. If she could just dial it back, like 90%, be respectful, maybe try making some other friends, and approach getting to know me like you'd approach getting to know any new person. Maybe something could develop over time. But this intense, entitled, boundary-stomping behavior is pushing me away fast. She wants the benefits of a lifelong sisterly bond without putting in any of the work or showing any basic social grace or respect for my autonomy. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, constantly trying to manage her expectations and reactions, and it's incredibly draining. It's starting to affect my friendships. Emily has definitely been avoiding me a bit since the boyfriend lecture. And my general peace of mind. I dread seeing her name pop up on my phone or running into her on campus. How do I handle this? How do I get her to back off and understand that this isn't working, without causing another massive public meltdown or completely destroying any chance, however slim, of maybe having some kind of civil relationship someday? I feel trapped. Update 1. Wow, okay, first off, thank you all so much for the comments and advice on my original post. It was actually really validating to hear that I wasn't crazy for feeling overwhelmed and that her behavior wasn't normal or acceptable. Reading through your suggestions, the overwhelming consensus was that I needed to have a direct, honest conversation with Mandy about boundaries and expectations. A lot of you pointed out that avoiding the issue or just hoping she'd magically change wasn't going to work. So, I took a deep breath and decided to do it. It took me a few days to work up the nerve. I kept replaying potential scenarios in my head. Her crying, her yelling, her storming off again. I finally texted her asking if we could talk sometime soon, just the two of us. She immediately replied, "Sure. When? Where? Can we get lunch?" I suggested meeting at a relatively quiet campus spot, one of the outdoor seating areas near the arts building, figuring neutral ground and open air might be less confrontational than my dorm room or a crowded coffee shop. We met up yesterday afternoon. It was awkward from the start. She arrived looking expectant, almost bubbly, like she thought this was just another casual hangout. I, on the other hand, felt like I had a lead weight in my stomach. I tried to start gently. I told her I was glad she transferred here and that I was open to the idea of getting to know her better and potentially building a friendship. I made sure to emphasize the word friendship and getting to know each other. Then came the hard part. I explained as calmly and kindly as I could that her expectations seemed a bit unrealistic given our history, or lack thereof. I said things like, "Mandy, we have to remember that we didn't grow up together. We barely know each other, really. We can't just jump into acting like sisters who have shared their whole lives. That kind of relationship takes time to build." I told her that her constant need to hang out was putting a lot of pressure on me, especially since I already had established routines, friendships, and commitments with school and my job. I explained that when I needed space or was busy, it wasn't a personal rejection of her, it was just reality. I specifically brought up the roommate situation again, explaining that trying to force me to ditch Sarah wasn't fair to anyone and set a bad tone from the beginning. I also mentioned how introducing her as my half-sister wasn't meant to be hurtful, but rather factual given our limited connection, and that her reaction in the coffee shop was really difficult for me. I tried to frame it less as an accusation and more as explaining my perspective and feelings. I also gently suggested that it would be really healthy for her to focus on making other friends too, especially through transfer student events or clubs that interest her. I said something like, "It's never a good idea to put all your social eggs in one basket, you know? College is a great chance to meet lots of different people." I emphasized that I was willing to hang out sometimes, but it needed to be more balanced and less pressured. We needed to start slow, like any two people getting to know each other. To my surprise, she didn't immediately explode. She listened, looking kind of thoughtful, maybe a little crestfallen. She nodded along to some parts. She said she understood, that maybe she had come on a bit strong. She apologized for making me feel pressured, and for the scene at Common Grounds, saying she was just really excited about finally having a sister around and got carried away. She even acknowledged that maybe trying to force the roommate thing wasn't cool. She seemed receptive, reasonable even. I felt a huge wave of relief. Maybe I'd misjudged her. Maybe she just needed someone to spell it out clearly? I ended the conversation by saying I was genuinely happy to try and build something, but we had to take it slow and respect each other's space and boundaries. I suggested maybe she could join me and some friends for a casual movie night later in the week, as a low-pressure way to hang out. She readily agreed, seeming genuinely pleased. I left that conversation feeling cautiously optimistic. Like, okay, maybe this can work. Maybe we just needed to clear the air. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I texted Sarah later and told her about the conversation, and she was cautiously optimistic too, though maybe a bit more skeptical than I was, given her own awkward experiences with Mandy. Still, it felt like a step in the right direction. Fingers crossed this truce actually holds, and she takes the feedback to heart. Thanks again, everyone. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Update 2. Okay, remember that cautious optimism I mentioned in my last update? Scratch that. Completely. Obliterate it. It didn't just crash and burn, it went down in a spectacular, cringe-inducing, argumentative dumpster fire. So, after our talk, things seemed okay for a few days. Mandy actually seemed to back off a little. She texted less frequently, and when she did, it wasn't demanding my immediate attention. I thought, wow, maybe she actually listened. Based on that, I followed through on my suggestion and invited her to hang out with me and some friends. It wasn't a big party, just a casual get-together in Sarah's and my dorm room on Friday night. We were planning to order pizza, watch a cheesy horror movie, just chill. Besides me and Sarah, our friends Emily, yes, the one Mandy lectured about her boyfriend, and Liam, from my psych class, who witnessed the coffee shop meltdown, were there. Maybe not the best audience given their previous encounters with Mandy, but they're my main friend group, and I figured keeping it casual and familiar was the way to go. Mandy arrived right on time, bringing a bag of slightly stale-looking cookies as a peace offering, which was a gesture, I guess. For the first hour or so, things were okay-ish. Awkward, but okay. Mandy was quieter than usual, mostly listening to the conversation. Liam was talking about a funny incident in his history lecture. Emily was cautiously friendly, but kept her distance, and Sarah and I were trying to keep the conversation flowing. Mandy chimed in a couple of times with comments that were slightly off-topic but not overtly offensive. The pizza arrived. We put on the movie, Sharktopus vs. Terracuta, a cinematic masterpiece, I know, and things seemed relatively normal. Then came the incident. Sarah and I are both Jewish. Not super religious, more culturally Jewish, but it's part of our background and identity. During a particularly ridiculous scene in the movie, Sarah made a joke, something self-deprecating about how her own mother would probably react to the situation with a classic Jewish mother guilt trip. I laughed and added another related joke, playing off the stereotype in a way that, between us, felt familiar and funny because we share that background. It was lighthearted insider humor. We weren't making fun of Jewish people. We were making fun of specific cultural tropes from within that culture. Suddenly, Mandy decides to join in. Now, Mandy is not Jewish. Not even remotely. Her mom is Irish Catholic. Our dad is vaguely Protestant agnostic. She has zero connection to Jewish culture or identity, beyond, knowing me for a few weeks. But she starts making Jewish jokes. And they weren't just unfunny. They quickly crossed the line into uncomfortable and then downright offensive territory. They weren't clever plays on stereotypes. They were just stereotypes. She started making comments about money, about noses, about complaining, things that sounded less like lighthearted teasing, and more like something you'd hear from an actual anti-Semite. The mood in the room plummeted instantly. Sarah's smile froze. Liam looked down at his pizza. Emily suddenly became fascinated by a loose thread on her jeans. I felt my stomach clench. It was incredibly awkward. Mandy seemed oblivious, laughing at her own jokes, maybe thinking she was bonding with me and Sarah by joining in. There was this horrible, heavy silence after her last comment, which was something particularly bad about lawyers. I finally just said, really quietly, "Okay, let's maybe change the subject." I glanced at Sarah, who looked genuinely upset and uncomfortable. The rest of the movie night was strained and awkward. Mandy seemed confused about why the mood had shifted, but thankfully she didn't try any more jokes. She left not long after the movie ended, probably sensing the weird vibe even if she didn't understand it. As soon as the door closed behind her, Sarah turned to me. "Molly, what the hell was that?" Emily and Liam both looked relieved she was gone, but also disturbed. Emily said, "Yeah, that was really uncomfortable." I felt awful, embarrassed that I'd subjected my friends to that, angry at Mandy for her cluelessness and insensitivity, and frustrated that my attempt to extend an olive branch had blown up so spectacularly. Sarah, to her credit, wasn't mad at me, but she was clearly offended by Mandy's comments. She said, I don't know if she was trying to be funny or if she actually thinks those things. But either way, it was not okay. I knew I had to talk to Mandy about it. I couldn't just let it slide. This wasn't just about her being clingy anymore. This was about her being actively offensive. I waited until the next day, giving myself some time to cool off so I wouldn't just yell at her. I texted her and asked if she could meet me, saying I needed to talk about something from the movie night. We ended up meeting outside the student union. I started by saying, "Hey Mandy, I need to talk about the jokes you were making last night. The ones about Jewish people." She immediately got defensive. "What about them? We were all joking around." I tried to explain. "Okay, look. Sarah and I were making jokes based on our own shared background. It's different when someone from outside the group makes jokes like that, especially when they rely on negative stereotypes. Honestly, some of the things you said were really offensive, and they made both me and Sarah uncomfortable." I tried to keep my tone calm and explanatory, not accusatory. Her defensiveness ramped up. "Offensive? Why would you think I was serious? You know me. You know I wouldn't actually believe those things. I was just trying to join in the fun." And that's where it really broke down. I told her, "Mandy, that's the problem. I don't really know you. We've known each other for a few weeks as adults, and barely at all before that. I have no idea what you secretly think about Jewish people or any other group. That's why it's risky and usually inappropriate to make those kinds of jokes about a group you're not part of. People don't know if you're kidding or if you're actually prejudiced." She wasn't hearing it. She crossed her arms. "So what? I'm just not allowed to make jokes? Sarah can make them, but I can't? That's not fair." "It's not about allowed, Mandy," I said, my frustration rising. "It's about context and impact. And the impact last night was that you offended people because you don't understand the nuances. You have to be more careful." Then she dropped this gem. "Well, I should be allowed to make those jokes. I'm basically Jewish anyway because I'm your sister." I stared at her. I actually could not believe she said that. "No, Mandy," I said, my voice getting firmer. "You are absolutely not Jewish. Being my half-sister doesn't magically make you Jewish or give you a free pass to say offensive things. That's not how it works. What you said wasn't funny. It was rude and ignorant." She completely lost it then. Her face flushed red and her voice got loud, attracting attention from people nearby. Again. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're always trying to shut me out. First, you don't want to be roommates. Then you call me half-sister like I'm nothing. Now I'm not even allowed to joke around with you and your friends because I'm not Jewish enough for you. You're just looking for ways to exclude me." "I am not shutting you out of anything," I retorted, finally losing my patience. "You are literally not Jewish. That is a fact. It has nothing to do with me excluding you. This isn't even really about the jokes anymore, although they were bad. This is about you thinking that our shared father entitles you to some special status, like you can just bypass common decency and claim parts of my identity or my friendships because we're related. You didn't listen to me last week when I said we needed to build things slowly, and you didn't listen to me just now when I told you your words were offensive. You just steamroll ahead, expecting everything to revolve around you and your desire for instant sisterhood." She looked genuinely stunned for a second, then her expression hardened. "You know what, Molly? Forget it. You're clearly just embarrassed by me and don't want me in your perfect little life. Fine. You won't have to worry about your embarrassing half-sister anymore." And with that, she turned around and stormed off, practically running across the lawn. I stood there for a minute, shaking slightly, a mixture of anger, frustration, and weirdly, a little bit of sadness washing over me. Later that evening, I noticed she had unfriended and blocked me on Facebook. I guess she really meant it. So, yeah, that's the end of that saga, I suppose. Part of me is immensely relieved. I don't have to deal with the constant clinginess, the demands, the awkwardness, the public scenes anymore. Life will be much less stressful without having to manage her. But another, smaller part of me feels kind of sad that it went down this way. Maybe in some alternate universe, we could have figured out how to have some kind of positive relationship. But she clearly has a lot of issues. Insecurity, entitlement, a complete lack of social awareness, maybe some unresolved stuff about our dad, that are way above my pay grade. Like some of you said, I can't be her therapist or her instant family. I did try to set boundaries and communicate. She refused to listen or respect them. It sucks that it ended so dramatically, especially over something as stupid as offensive jokes at a movie night. But honestly, the jokes were just the catalyst. The real issue was her fundamental misunderstanding of relationships and boundaries, and her insistence on forcing a connection that wasn't there. Anyway, thanks again for listening and for the advice earlier. It was worth trying the direct conversation, even if it ultimately led to this explosion. At least now I know I did what I could, and I can move on without feeling guilty. It's just, A really weird and unfortunate situation all around.